Now, what the fuck is his name?
Ghost Dog.
What?
Ghost Dog.
Ghost Dog?
He said Ghost Dog.
Yeah, he calls himself Ghost Dog.
I love films where someone is living by a code. My dad's from India, my mom was born in Japan. I've always just been interested in cultural mashups, right? So I heard that there was a samurai-influenced movie that was scored by RZA. Yeah. And I was like, I gotta see it.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and welcome back to the Film Nuts podcast. What are some things that you wouldn't think would go together, but actually do? It could be a peanut butter and bacon sandwich, or Danger Mouse's The Grey Album, which combines the Beatles with Jay-Z. But how about an Italian mob movie mixed with Eastern philosophy and a really dope hip-hop soundtrack? That gets you today's film, Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. Starring Forrest Whitaker, directed by Jim Jarmusch, and scored by founding Wu-Tang Clan member The RZA, this film meshes styles, tropes, and genres to create an unforgettable experience. After being saved by a member of an organized crime syndicate, the lead character, Ghost Dog, honors the man who saved his life by becoming his go-to assassin. The film, with its blending of influences and unique themes, resonated with today's guest. Saleem Reshamwala is a filmmaker, podcaster, and all-around creator whose life and career has been both rooted in and about exploring the mashing up of cultures. Saleem was kind enough to have me over to his backyard studio, surrounded by kid toys and live chickens, for my first in-person session of this podcast. Only took 3 seasons, right? We talk with him about film editing, the magic behind a perfect one take, and how the messages and themes of Ghost Dog relate something different to him almost every time he watches it. So, let's kick it. Here's Saleem Reshamwala talking about Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, on the Film Nuts podcast.
Good, man. I'm good. It's a beautiful day. I'm glad to be recording this in person.
I know.
It's wonderful to meet someone and then be doing something with them in person rather than only on Zoom. You know, nothing wrong with a Zoom recording, but it feels great to be back in the world among humans.
We've been doing Zoom for too long.
It's too long, man. It's definitely too long.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, man. This is quite a place you have here. I really dig it.
I'm really glad to have you over here in the shed. You know, right before the pandemic, we fixed up the shed so I could do my editing in here, and then started working at podcasting at this little podcast room in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, there's like a very tiny drum kit and some keyboards. So people are over
I did
here.
See that.
Yeah, people are over here jamming a fair amount.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Oh yeah. So wait. So you started fixing this up before the pandemic hit?
Coincidentally, very luckily,
Wow.
right before the pandemic.
Wow.
Right before the pandemic. So one of those things that really, really worked out since. Yeah, as we were talking just before we set up that, you know, all filming kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And so it was great to have a good space to be editing. I had an office downtown in Durham, but I didn't have an office. Was part of a collective that rented an office, Collided Collective, rented an office together. And yeah, I'm glad that we was very lucky to be able to work remote and have a space to do it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, my partner and I went from sharing a bedroom that was an office in an apartment to finally getting a house a couple months ago. We each have our own separate spaces, and I feel like our relationship has improved since.
It's good. It's a good thing to have. A little space is good, man.
Yeah.
As a dad, you know, little space away from the kids when you're recording audio makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing kids laughing and chickens outside. You said
Yep. We just walked past 6 chickens, a bunch of kids running around. It's not a pristine audio environment, but we'll do our best.
I love it. I love being around people. This is great, man. Okay, so what's been going on? What kind of projects you got going on? Talk to me about Far Flung.
So Far Flung is a podcast from TED. They reached out to me right before the pandemic. Turned out to be really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
It's a podcast on international ideas. Just before the pandemic, I was in Peru filming hip hop. not just before, it's kind of when it was first really starting to be a thing. We were just starting to see news about it. I was scheduled about 2 months later to be in Mumbai, Albania, and
Wow.
Ireland
Whoa.
working on this podcast for TED. So
Yeah.
Far Flung is a podcast for TED. It's a podcast on international ideas.
Okay.
Tricky to do a podcast on international ideas when there's a pandemic that stops all travel.
Yeah.
So
Weird.
we've had to be very, very creative. We ended up working that gig that I was doing, filming hip hop, turned into one of the episodes of Far Flung.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so we did an episode on indigenous languages being preserved through hip hop in Peru. It's been a journey. Honestly though, it's really cool to work on storytelling in another format. So different from film, as you know, from doing a podcast. So it's a very narrative podcast, which means that unlike a two-way, like two people talking,
Yeah.
there's a lot of editing that goes into it and a lot of interviews. Like we've just got, days worth of audio sometimes for one episode.
Yeah.
But it's been good. It's been good.
That's so cool. So I feel like your work, from what I have seen, especially in I guess relatively recent years, pandemic aside,
Yeah.
it's been travel oriented. There's been some hip hop oriented content there as well,
Yeah.
filmmaking. And so when you suggested Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai, I hadn't seen this movie,
Yeah. It's
and
a
when I
weird one.
started watching it, I was like, "This makes sense."
yeah. It's funny. I hadn't seen it myself in years and years. And it's so interesting when people ask about a favorite movie or, it's really tricky to say a favorite film, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But so there was a few things in my mind, and obviously your favorite can change from week to week,
Mhm.
from year to year for
Mhm.
sure, from day to day. But that's a film that definitely came along. Films are kind of like music in the
Yeah.
sense that your memory of a song and your love for a song is so tied to the memories around that song, right? So if you have an amazing summer, I'm thinking of a hip hop album right now that I associate with driving around. 808s and Heartbreaks. 808s and Heartbreak. That album I associate with driving around in Japan at night, and that album is so perfect for that setting.
Mm.
So similar with film, I think this movie came along at a time in my life when it was like a perfect time for me to see it.
Mm. So, what time in your life was perfect? What
Oh
was
man,
perfect
so I
about it?
probably saw this movie. I imagine I was in college at the time when I first saw it.
This came out in '99.
99. So yeah, maybe I saw it a little bit after college or in my last year of college, maybe somewhere around there. I heard that there was a samurai influenced movie that was scored by RZA,
Yeah,
and I was like, I gotta
gotta
see
see
it.
it.
I gotta see it. So I'd read these descriptions of it. I actually can't remember if I first saw it in the theater or if I maybe I rented it. I'm not sure, but that movie is a fearless mashup,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very weird, And again, I would reiterate, like, a film that I love that doesn't mean I'm saying it's the best, this, that, or the other. I'm just saying it's the thing that hit me just right
Yeah,
when it came along. And obviously a lot of that's tied to my background.
mm-hmm.
My dad's from India, my mom was born in Japan. I've always just been interested in cultural mashups, and that film's got a lot of them. What'd you think of it when you saw it?
I really dug it. Like, I had no idea what I was getting into. So
Yeah.
I remember. So my only memory of the movie obviously can't be much because I hadn't seen it. But when I would go to Blockbuster, I always saw the VHS cover art or a DVD cover art for this film, and it always stuck with me. And I don't know why. Like, if you showed me,
What's the
that
cover art? I
picture-
can't remember. It's funny. I used to work at Blockbuster.
yeah, I was about to bring that up actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I wonder. if
I worked
it's really
there
from
back in the day. I don't remember what the cover. What is the cover?
So
is it Forrest Whitaker?
It's Forrest Whitaker. I believe, and this is one of those things where it's an exercise from memory. It's Forrest Whitaker with his jacket and his hood up, and it's kind of like a 45-degree angle shot of him. And the cover, the art is like blue, and there's like the faded text from the samurai book that
Oh,
he's
yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
And then it just says in like kind of like scribble script up top, Ghost Dog.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't know what drew me in about it, because I would see it and have no idea what it was. But it was never like it was a curiosity that I would always put in the back of my head. Like, this looks like something I want to eventually check out, but it's not going to be at the top of my list, mostly because I don't know what it is. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I had no idea what I was getting into. I knew there was like a organized crime unit somewhere, somewhere in the film.
Yeah.
But as you start watching it, it's a samurai influenced gangster movie.
Yeah.
That's also kind of funny. Like
it's hilarious.
Yeah.
At times very weird.
Very weird. Like, there's odd pacing, but it never throws me for a loop. Like, it just kind of, instead of leaning back, it has me lean forward.
For the past few days, I've been watching it in bits and pieces. Since yesterday, I woke up very early, just woke up at like 4 and couldn't sleep. And then finally, by 6 a.m., I was just like, okay, cool. I'm just going to watch some Ghost Dog, get fresh for this conversation.
Yeah.
The editing in that film is very unusual. I mean, you can start, the unusual elements, like you said, hit you from the box, right? So you've got Forrest Whitaker, who has one of the most distinctive faces, period, has this kind of inherent chill vibe that, huge props to Jim Jarmusch, that, it kind of makes sense for a samurai influenced man living in the year 1999, I mean, I feel like for folks who haven't seen the film, it's a very atmospheric take on what someone living a challenging life in 1999 through the filter of kind of Italian mob influenced films.
Yeah.
Like, it's got there's like that Godfather kind of vibe in some of the stuff.
But then there's like this African American hip hop undertone to the entire thing.
Oh, sure.
And not even because of the score.
Yeah.
Like the characters that are in it, not like excluding the main character, the relationships he has, the people he runs into.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, like you said, it's the ultimate cultural mashup, I guess.
Yeah. So, the premise basically is that Forrest Whitaker's character, Ghost Dog, is living his life via the Hagakure, which is one of the most famous books of kind of samurai philosophy. There's an interesting quirk in that it was actually written years after the real warring samurai era, right? So the people who were writing that text had not actually lived that life directly, right? They weren't actually in war. They were training, of course, and all that. But so sometimes it gets a little criticism for being, it's like in the same way that someone might write as if they were super tough nowadays,
right,
in the current moment,
writing
and then you find out that person, it lives in the suburbs.
They actually haven't lived.
Yeah, right.
Was it? Do you know? Was it based off of like a warrior's theory of what it might be like, or was it based off of?
Yes,
stuff
I do
handed
think
down?
it was. I do think it was stuff that was handed down.
Okay.
Theoretically, so I think it is stuff that was handed down. I purchased that book after watching the movie.
Yeah.
I love films where someone is living by a code. And that movie in a lot of ways is about people who are living by codes that might be outdated at times, right? So you see these recurring the movie it's worth taking a moment to just like dwell on how strange, aside from that initial setting, the film itself will just pause and text from this ancient samurai text will appear on screen. And then Forrest Whitaker starts reading that text out loud.
Our bodies are given life from the midst of nothingness. Existing where there is nothing is the meaning of the phrase, form is emptiness. That all things are provided for by nothingness is the meaning of the phrase, emptiness is form. One should not think that these are two separate things.
And some of those little maxims, they really stuck with me. There's one, I'll paraphrase. There's And it's really, we have to put aside for the moment like whether these are correct interpretations of the text, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just expressing like how it affected me as I perceived it in the film.
Mhm.
So there's a line that's basically like matters. I'm gonna butcher it a bit, but
Mhm.
fundamentally, it's um matters of great importance should be decided lightly,
Yeah.
and small matters of detailed importance should be decided with great care.
Yeah.
And that influenced me so much. I've moved around a lot. I've lived in a lot of different spots. And at times when I was trying to make a hard decision, I just try to make it as lightly as possible.
Mm.
So it really stuck with me. It was kind of my introduction to some of those philosophies, and to doing more reading in those areas.
Mhm.
It's a thing that again compels me every time it comes up. There's that line from the Wire. Have you watched The Wire?
Yeah.
Okay, so Omar says a man's got to have a code.
Yeah.
And throughout Ghost Dog, you have these conflicting codes or these outdated codes.
Mhm.
And for me, a movie like that is a movie about people trying to figure out how to live. And that's why for me it's absurdly not relevant
Mhm.
to my life in some ways. Like I'm not in a situation where I'm seeing violence
Yeah.
and I'm not, but it is a bunch of people trying to figure out what to honor
Mhm.
and how to live off that,
Mhm.
which feels relevant to everybody.
Maybe you ought to get back in your fancy car and go about your own business.
Yeah. Maybe you're right.
You fucking hit my knee.
You know, in ancient cultures, bears were considered equal with men.
This ain't no ancient culture here, mister.
Sometimes it is.
We're getting the curtain peeled back to take a look at the way Ghost Dog is living his life. He's like literally telling us how he lives his life, like the codes he honors.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's also recognizing, especially toward the end of the movie, he's recognizing, or at least has decided, that his way is also an old way.
Yeah.
And the way that I kind of broadly interpreted all of it was this old way versus new way in the way that people communicate. Because to me, at least, like, and also there's a lot of animal imagery in this movie, from his name being Ghost Dog to communicating via pigeons. Ghost Dog is equated to a bear at one point.
Yeah.
And just the way that people communicate, like they communicate by homing pigeon. For the mob themselves, their way of communication is violence.
Yeah.
And the two like most wholesome relationships that Ghost Dog has are with a guy who they don't even speak the same language.
Yeah.
And with a girl who he just wants to talk about books with.
Yeah.
And like is
A
constantly
very young girl.
Yeah, very young girl.
Like a child.
Yeah. And just like exchanging books and wanting to talk about the books. And to me, like the way, I don't know if I went out on a limb or what was going on, but to me, that said something about the way that people need to evolve in their communication as we grow up. And I mean,
Yeah, there's so much. So in that film, Forrest Whitaker doesn't talk very much at all. It's not a
we don't see him talk until 37 minutes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just kind of silently moving through the city. It's worth noting just how weird the opening to that movie is. I didn't realize until this rewatch that it basically opens with a pigeon's eye view. Like you see a pigeon,
a literal bird's eye view,
and you're literally now flying through the air,
Mm-hmm.
helicopter shot at the time, I'm sure,
Mhm.
like seeing the bird's eye view, and then the pigeon lands, and you kind of zoom past the pigeon coop
Mm-hmm.
through a window to see Forrest Whitaker reading this guidebook to how his life's going to be. I love the thing you just brought up. The two main character, or the main character, Ghost Dog, has his best friend who sells ice cream, and they don't speak the same language.
Chocolate's my favorite.
Yeah, me too.
Ah, sacré chocolat. Et même si la vanille est le parfum le plus populaire au monde, eh bien, le chocolat reste le meilleur en réalité.
What language is he talking in?
French. He only speaks French.
Do you understand French?
No, just English. I never understand a word he says.
And that's your best friend?
Yeah.
And there's kind of a bit of a running gag of them each fully understanding each other, even though one is speaking French, Haitian French.
Yeah.
And the other is speaking English, and there's like zero overlap in their linguistic abilities. But it's funny. It's funny. and you know, you mentioned something that Jim Jarmusch does. It just kind of, he holds shots for kind of an unusual amount of time sometimes. There was this interesting mirroring for me in rewatching and thinking about right from the beginning. I was like, wait, I don't see many things now, especially now that such a percentage of our viewing is coming through social media, right? That's paced this way. So I could hear the edit notes of like, oh, why are you doing a slow crossfade here?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's jump cuts all over the place in that film, actually. And it's interesting. He does jump cuts in a way that allows him to then cut without worrying too much about continuity.
You do a jump cut right, it doesn't matter that it's a jump cut.
Yeah. And so there was this interesting mirroring in watching this film that was out of time for me, right? It's a film that for me in the year 2020 is coming from this different period, is paced in this different way. And thinking about how in the film itself, it's referring to people who are following codes that are outdated.
Yeah.
And people who are referring to ancient cultures, or, you know, in the case of the gangsters, this gang code. It's so important to me to figure out ways to step outside of time in our own lives, to try and like, it's almost, I mean, a film from 1999 is not that old, but in some ways it's a transmission from another planet, from where we are now. You know, with the amount of, you know, the rush of information, it's easy, even just in things like editing, to subconsciously find ourselves chasing trends.
Yeah.
You know, like you see a new kind of cut that everyone's using, and you start
you
start using that. And I'm not knocking that at all.
I am.
But well, you know, it's hard not to do. It's hard to not do when
things are they can be trendy. Things are allowed to be trendy.
Yeah.
And you got to move on.
It's tricky, right? So it's interesting to me that the experience of watching that film is this experience that's so distinct from watching a lot of what's made right now. And then in the film itself, it's also talking about people who are calling back to times outside of their own time.
Well, now you really better shoot me. There's no way I'm ever going to explain this. Fucking Marini. Okay, shoot me. Go ahead. Kill me now.
I'm your retainer. It's against the code of the samurai to kill you.
Look, if you're my retainer, whatever the fuck that is, I do what I'm telling you and fucking shoot me. What the hell did you do that for?
You told me to. I don't mean you no disrespect. Anyway, now you got an excuse. You can tell them I attacked you both.
You better watch your back, Ghost Dog! Like you said, everything seems to be changing around us.
And in a way, it's almost like, do you think about those individuals that are calling back to an older ancient time? Do they even understand what they're referring to?
Yeah, you know, you're put in this interesting spot as the viewer. you see these quotes from the Hagakure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have complete context, and you try to you like as you watch the film, you're processing them and thinking about them as a person far, far away from the original text, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what's happening to Ghost Dog in the
Mhm.
film too. He's reading it and recontextualizing it in the moment, and you know, it's easy to say what's an authentic read, what's an inauthentic read, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of the film.
Mhm.
Whether Ghost Dog is reading it in a truly authentic way. It's that this dude has found a way to live. He's
Yeah.
found a way to get by. He's found a way to not be held down by doubt, you know? And a lot of stuff in those quotes is really interestingly relevant to any time period.
Mm-hmm.
The other one I think about a lot is one of the quotes is a story of how at the end of picnics, people would stomp their bento boxes. They would crush them on the ground. And it's like, the end is important in all things.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that so much in just daily events,
Yeah.
a party, a conference, a hangout, how you could have, you know, if like, let's say that at the end of this interview, as you're walking out, let's say that on the way to this interview, you had some bad traffic and you were really thirsty. Now you're sitting down, you're relaxed, you got some water in front of you, and things end here. Like you walk away, like you're gonna be like, man, that was so chill. You know, I was having this impatience with traffic happening to me, and I was real thirsty. Then we sat down. You know, you had the water you brought with you. If you flip that, and you're walking out of this interview, and something negative happens, it's hard for your brain to make a full overall picture of that experience because you hang on that ending.
The one thing. You
The
remember
one thing.
Yeah.
And it happens with movies. You know, if a movie has a terrible ending,
Oh yeah.
I didn't actually watch not for any particular reason. I just haven't seen the Game of Thrones. I didn't watch it. But so many people talk about how they hate the ending.
I did. I saw a total of 4 episodes. But yeah, everybody talks about like the last season that has seen it and just like rags on it and is like so upset.
Its place in the culture got knocked by its ending.
Yeah. And I'm like, do you regret?
I don't know.
Eight
It's
years of
really
your life,
interesting.
or-
Yeah, I don't know. Like if a movie has a super terrible ending,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you'll feel like that's a bad movie.
Yeah.
But if you sit through the whole 2 hours, if it has a really okay, mediocre, slow beginning, but then picks up and ends amazingly, that ending is what is the feeling, you know? People think about it with relationships, of course, you know, all kinds of things. So I'm just always curious about that. It's strange when you have, it's a very hard thing to pull off, a movie that literally writes themes on the screen.
Yeah.
That could have gone really sideways. I don't really know how this film works. I don't really know how Ghost Dog works as a movie.
Hey, folks. Thanks so much for listening to the Film Nuts podcast. Pardon the interruption, but let me quickly tell you how you can support us. It's real easy. Just subscribe on your listening platform of choice to stay up to date with all of our episodes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review so we know how we're doing. Also, it'll help us get noticed by other awesome individuals like you. Okay, now back to the good stuff. I think the film is so simplistically put together that it doesn't really give you room. It doesn't warrant overthinking.
Yeah,
I think. Like if there's a shot that we're lingering on, like there's a reason. Like one of the things that I could think of is like, and this is toward the end of the movie, where I already have like the theme of communication in my head.
Yeah.
It's the head mobster honcho, I'm regretting his name right now, and his daughter just sitting next to each other.
Yep.
And it's just that there's no movement to the shot. It's just a locked off shot of the two of them just sitting next to each other, facing the direction of the camera, and there's just like they're not talking.
If we're not worried about spoilers,
oh no, this is
there's a thing that at
spoiler.
the end that I don't even know if I caught before the first time I watched it, but the mob boss character gets asked by Ghost Dog, so you're the leader now.
Now you're gonna be the boss of your own clan, right, Louis? Because ain't nobody else left. Is that right, Louis?
Not exactly, Ghost Dog.
and he gets in. He says, "Let's go."
Let's go. Let's get out of here.
And the daughter waits,
Mhm.
and then she tells the driver when they go.
Mhm.
And it was I don't think I caught it the first time. I was like, oh, maybe she's like taking over.
Oh,
this,
that didn't
this
register.
family.
Yeah.
I
That
think
didn't
she's
register.
maybe taking over the family. Is the way that's set up.
Yeah.
Is
Interesting.
so he's now our mob boss is now like in a position similar to Ghost Dog. He's now stuck with loyalty to one person rather than a whole mob because that mob got wiped out.
Yeah. And now it makes me think about would she run things differently? Because she seems to be coming from the school of the newer levels of communication. Because she's who are the people reading books in this film? Like it's Ghost Dog, it's Pauline, the little girl.
Perline,
Perline, excuse me. And the little girl and I can't remember the actress character's name who plays the mob boss's daughter. But they're all the ones who are leaning on spoken word, a written word to guide their life, maybe.
Yeah, the end of that movie kind of mirrors an arc that happens in The Wire for me. So in The Wire, at the very end of The Wire, every single character in that film has been recreated as a child. So all the kids who are, now like high schoolers, I guess at that point, you have like almost you see the kid who's now become the junkie. You see the kid who's now become the gang leader. At the end of Ghost Dog, a part of me feels like, so you see all these handoffs. So that daughter becomes the new gang leader, but you also have Perline reading Ghost Dog's text.
Yeah.
And she's kind of maybe going to become Ghost Dog in this thing in some kind of way. You can tell that her mom's like telling her to get up out of the kitchen and she's not even noticing. She's totally focused on that book, which mirrors one of the principles in the book, which is a lot about like really precise focus and attention. A lot of that movie's talking about avoiding distraction. There's a line from the book that it mentions where it's like when a hawk has a target, it can fly into a flock of 1,000 birds, but will see none of them and stay totally focused on the bird that's its target. It says, you should live your life in a way such that, and again, I'm paraphrasing all this, that if your head is cut off, your body will still complete the last action it was doing.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is me reading it through the lens of our time, but it's kind of a movie about attention in a way, and focus and completion of the things that you're bound to do, right? It's hard not to see that through the lens of me getting 1,000 separate tweets going across a timeline a day. But so I mentioned like, I don't know how that movie works. And one of the cool things about a movie that's got so much ambiguity is if it can hold you, then you can come back to it in the same way that I think of, lots of historical texts that really stand this test of time are ones that are just detailed enough, but also just vague enough that people can bring something else to it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think? Like, so when I see a movie like this, I'm immediately like, even watching over the past 2 days, I was like, man, I got to get more experimental. I got to get more to where I'm coming from a place of mystery rather than just trying to communicate ideas clearly. What did you think what goes through your head when you see a movie like this where it's like paced in an unusual way? And I don't know how you pitch a lot of like, if you've got to pitch a lot of the ideas in this movie, that's a hard pitch.
Yeah.
Like, how does that joke work? Like, how does that, like, there's a lot in this movie that would be very hard to explain to someone.
I think when I was watching it going in with very little knowing what was going on, I wasn't, there were zero expectation on the table for me. So a lot of times an expectation can ruin something, either if I have it too high or too low, and so I just didn't know what was going on. I think I felt a little bit positive before I started watching it because I realized that I can only watch it on the Criterion channel.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this has got some legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
Let me download this trial real quick. So, and then while I was on there, I was like, oh man, I go to search Ghost Dog, and then there's like 5 other things. Like there's a director's commentary, there's deleted. I'm like, this is awesome. Anyway, so
No, I mean, I think it's worth saying that I had a similar experience. I went to, I saw that it was on Amazon Prime. And I went over there and it was like, oh, it's not available. And I searched and it was like on the Criterion channel, which I have, and I don't watch as much as I should have. But watching this movie over the past 2 days, because, you know, I have kids, I'm freelancing, like it's hard
to find
time
2
to
hours.
watch. Yeah, it's very hard. It made me realize, like, I think I'm just gonna be one of those people who watches amazing films in bits and pieces, and just like lean on Criterion channel to get me through that.
Yeah, I think for me from a storytelling standpoint, like the movie was just weird enough to keep me interested in how it was telling a story, and then through it, I felt like I said earlier, I felt like the communication of the ideas, like the following of the plot, like all that was super simple. Like I didn't have to overthink it. I didn't have to go, wait, who's this person? You know, whatever. I was just thinking about all the different techniques that they were using. This is, you know, this film came out, over 2 decades ago. But for some reason to me, probably because of the way it looks, like it feels like a smaller film for 1999, which is like one of the greatest years in movie history. It feels like something a lot more grounded. And that's what I like. See, I like really grounded stories. Now, it could be crazy bananas, like high concept sci-fi.
Yeah.
But if it's rooted in super like grounded principles, then I'm in.
Yeah.
When this movie came out, Roger Ebert didn't really get it.
Huh.
He gave it 3 stars because he thought it was really well done, but he was like, Ghost Dog is crazy. Like, why is no one saying this?
Interesting.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting too. And I was like, I guess you could make that argument like from an outside viewer standpoint, but for me, I was paying attention to him because it's about him and it's about the justifications behind his actions and the fact that
the movie doesn't work without Forrest Whitaker, right?
It doesn't.
You have to have a great, mysterious, vibey actor in that role. Hearing you mention the Ebert review really makes me want to read that review. I'm so curious.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
He gave it 3 stars. So I mean,
so it's something.
It wasn't thumbs up. It was 3 stars.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was like, I enjoyed it, but he kept talking. He had so many problems with I think believing the actions of the character, or he was just disregarding them, which was kind of
I got to go back and read that. So with that film, I haven't read many reviews of it, so I don't actually know, aside from the fact that it's on the Criterion channel, like how it was received.
It didn't have a big box office bring in.
That's not shocking. Yeah.
It's not shocking. And I only read a couple. One of them was like a Criterion review, which was obviously very positive about this film. But the other was Ebert. And I was like, he always has something decent to say. And that was the one that I saw. So that was, I didn't expect that from him. I more expected him to dive into the film itself rather than being distracted by he really thought this character was crazy. Like, why is like, it was super odd.
I watched something like that. I watched a movie like that, and I think, how does someone get the confidence? And this is kind of like getting back a little bit to what we were chatting about earlier. How do you get the confidence to make something that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I want to reach for. And at times,
you got to really believe in it.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
if you were telling someone what is strange about this movie, what would you tell them?
I think I would say pacing.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't drag and it doesn't rush. It's just, like we said earlier, shots will linger for seconds longer than you feel like they need to.
There's that thing in screenwriting where it's like at every beginning of every scene, someone should want something and they either get it or they don't. And that's how the scene ends, right? Like that's like one of the ways of thinking about scenes in screenwriting. There's a lot in this movie that is kind of atmospheric. So Ghost Dog sits down on a bench. In the background, you have people freestyling. And then veers over and we're just hanging out listening to lyrics for a bit.
We on a conquest, a mercenary strike force, another life lost, murdered on the ice cross. Vengeance, black ninjas with monkey wrenches, multiple gunshot wounds from 9 inches. 2010 cyborgs with heat sensors. Astro, my ghost dogs that climb fences.
Hey yo, check this. License plate state Texas. White Lexus, my diamond necklace. Got me living reckless. Got me wiping cats out on my shit list. I move with the 360, my cream flow. 6.000. Black Mafia, mind De Niro. In my hood, I'm a hero.
Ooh, that's what I'm talking about.
And then they walk off screen and you don't see them again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It's a movie where you're allowed to just get into headspace a bit. I don't know how you have the confidence. I'd love to read the script because I'm not sure. How do you can't rationalize some of those moves, right?
Like what?
So for example, like that, how do you explain that scene when someone's like, oh, like you could imagine being in an edit room and somebody being like, oh, like, I don't know about this scene here where these guys are rapping off to the side of where he's sitting. Like, does the story still make sense without that? Yes, 100% it does. Yeah. And there's often a thing of like, oh, let's cut anything that doesn't move the story forward.
Yeah.
That's like a really, and often makes things better, right?
Yeah.
As an editor. But how do you get into the headspace where you allow scenes that don't move the story forward? Like, could that movie work functionally showing less of Ghost Dog walking around? Could it work functionally not hanging on him so much when he's driving? You know, some of the edits they make sense. You can rationalize. There's a great scene where like Ghost Dog pops out, he forces some people to an alley, and you assume that he's about to kill this guy.
Yeah.
But then he walks out and he's carrying clothes. Yeah. After he's there for a long time, he hangs there for a long time. And when he comes out, he's carrying clothes and you realize he's just stolen their clothes. You don't know why yet. But then he leaves and then it hangs for a bit and you see the people come out and it's completely comical. Like they're just in their underwear.
Yeah.
But that's in one shot.
Yeah.
It's continuous.
Yeah.
It's continuous. There's so many times when he could have chosen to cut and get some other angle, but it makes you feel how long and awkward it was for these people to be standing there in their underwear trying to decide when they could come out and see if Ghost Dog.
That was one of my favorites.
It's
that was
a great
one of
scene.
my favorite scenes.
So that's something that you can. It's easier for me to rationalize.
Yeah.
Whereas like some of the like, how long are we hanging on this pigeon as it just vibes out to a beat? It works for me and feels of a piece with the movie, but what I really want to learn more about is how people get the artistic confidence to do things like that, but then also as an editor, how does someone decide when to let stuff hang like that and when it's worth it and when to obey the classic like oh, it's not moving the story forward, like cut it, which often does make things way better, but if something's so super vibey, then maybe it gets to stay.
A lot of it, I mean, you would know this, a lot of it is feel.
Yeah.
Like you're just cutting something together and you're like, I don't feel like I should cut yet. And you're not even like, there's not even a score underneath it.
Yeah.
You're just lingering on a shot and you're like, now. Like now is when I'll cut. Yeah. A lot of it's feel. I think anyway. I mean, I'm sure someone has broken down a scientific approach to it, but.
Who locally is working in this mode? I'm kind of curious.
I don't want to say no one.
I mean, we don't know every filmmaker.
Because we don't.
Yeah, we don't know.
But I can't.
So I was just curious if there's anybody who jumps out at you.
No. I can't think of anybody that's doing something like this. Most people that I know that are kind of still around here and haven't moved away are still trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
Or they're in commercial or reality space.
Got it.
Then there are the people that are in doc, which are doing great. But I feel like there's not anyone super in particular who's doing something really like original, good and bad. Like I can't think of anybody who's like shooting for the moon and like just missing the mark, or I can't anybody I think is like super excellent. But I don't know. I don't mean.
Well, someone they hit us up if you're out there.
There's so many people here.
Hit us up. Hit us up. I'll shout out. She just moved to Greensboro. Juliana is an experimental filmmaker. She goes by Juliana Vision online and does some really dope stuff. I don't know how much narrative she's doing, but does some really dope stuff. It was interesting watching this film because I did a short film last year. That was my first like narrative short. It was assembled really fast during the pandemic, right? Basically, I had something that happened that never happened. Somebody hit me up and was like, "Hey, if you can write something and shoot it over the next couple months, I'll fund a short film." Which that's just not a call that I normally get. But in it, there's an undocumented immigrant who is running an ice cream van, and when I was like mapping it out, I had Ghost Dog as like a reference, like the ice cream truck in there. But it was I hadn't seen the film in years, and this time when I saw, he mentions in the film, he's like, "Oh, I thought the police, or not the police." He's like, "I thought maybe that was some guy trying to report me." It was so interesting to see that's stuck in my head. I'm sure, you know.
Yeah. Going back to the scene where Ghost Dog takes the couple's clothes, and we're acknowledging that that's like a really long one take.
Yeah.
Speaking to someone who I feel like has made a lot of really good one take content.
I love a good one take. I love working
what
on
like
one
what about a one take really appeals to you? I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and just say the North Cac video is one of the best music videos I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind.
And even
That's so
even
kind.
the long take stuff you did for His Golden Messenger as well was like really engaging too, because it's like and in those it was a very simple setup, but you're gravitated toward like the individual, which is so cool. So what has attracted to you? What has attracted you to one takes?
I love one takes. You know, there's one we did for this band Young Bull, and we built a house in a field.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah,
tore it
I
down,
did see that.
basically, and play it in reverse. It's all one take. Shout out to His Golden Messenger. That I think that one might have been the artist's idea for that one to be a one take. With North Cac, I just really wanted to make it one take. I just really, really wanted to do that one.
Was it you always wanted to do, or you heard the song and you're like, this is a one take?
Oh, I think there's a mix. So I always wanted to do a one take. I love the fact that I love anytime the process is visible. And so, you know, cuts hide things. That's one of the coolest things about cuts.
Yeah.
You know? But a one take, you really know that everyone was there for the whole thing, doing the thing, you know? It makes you sit with it in a different way. There's a little bit of a inherent narrative propulsion in where's this going and how long can they pull this off without it getting messed up. You know?
Almost like a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And I just love the commitment of, okay, we're going to do this thing. Here we go. With like the Young Bull thing, we could only do it once. With the North Cac thing, we did a bunch of tries. A long take makes you sit with a moment in a different way. And it makes you, for me, it makes the world feel very real. Now, the flip side of that is reality is kind of boring. Like a surveillance camera over 24 hours is a one take, technically, but you're not going to watch a 24-hour, you know, so you have to fill it with things. You really have to keep a one take moving. There's got to be either constant things happening, or that tension, which is what I think makes the Ghost Dog scene. I'm also really intrigued. You know, I've been doing this project where I occasionally chop up Bollywood films. Basically they get run to like I'll take like a few hundred Bollywood film clips that runs to a drum machine that's not actually making any sound. It just allows me to trigger, like I'm tapping the buttons and making clips from the movie start while my friend DJ Rang, it's a night that he started. He'll be actually playing the music. We got, you know, a drummer, G2 Singh, who's going beside it. But one of the things I noticed is that those Bollywood films have much longer takes than, say, like the old Bollywood films have a much longer take than a modern thing where you're quick cutting constantly, right?
Yeah.
And there's really, really interesting ways that people can fake a wipe. Like you have a group of dancers move in front of the camera, you know? There's a great video. Have you seen the series Every Frame a Painting?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's my favorite, the thing that changed my filmmaking the most was a video in that series on comedy. That piece talks a lot about what you can do with the camera to reveal information. And a lot of that's happening in Ghost Dog too. There's a lot of times when they could have done something by a cut, but they'll start low and then the camera will tilt up and reveal another character.
Yeah.
You know, Parasite is a film that uses so many pans to reveal. So when I see older films that are using that a lot more, it really gets me excited. You know, like Wes Anderson's the one everyone talks about now with like the pan to reveal the comedic gag.
Yeah.
And he's great at it. But I'm really intrigued by folks who are using it in that space where it's in between drama and comedy. Like parts of Parasite are really funny.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Ghost Dog is really funny, but there's also a lot of tension in both films. That's a really intriguing space for me.
Finding a balance like that's difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your favorite scene in this film?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I still love the scenes with the ice cream man.
Yeah.
The way this movie ends with the ice cream man, Ghost Dog takes a gun away from the ice cream man. He doesn't want the ice cream man to. When you see the final scene, you get that he doesn't want the ice cream man to be involved in a shootout.
Yeah.
That would have, been terrible. But that passing on of all the stuff, of passing his book to the little girl, giving the ice cream man the keys to the suitcase that has the money inside. I don't know what the ice cream man is supposed to do with all those guns, but there is a lot of money in the suitcase as well. I think that's my favorite.
That's a good one. So why should people watch this film?
There's some stuff where you're like, oh, you got to watch this film because you're going to like it. I have no idea if folks are going to like this movie or not.
Yeah.
But it puts you in a different headspace. And I heard this quote about art, and I bring this up all the time. It's by this dude, George Saunders, this writer, George Saunders. He says, great art is like a black box. And what matters is if you go into that box, something should change in you before you come out of it. Right? So I think about that all the time. Like it's funny, you mentioned one takes. I think about two things with respect to that with one takes. Like one is, how can I make this thing that someone watches and something about them changes by the end? That's like a very high, challenging goal, right? Like that's the thing you're striving for. I'm not saying I hit that. But then the other thing I think about is like, oh, how can I make this experience of making the film something that everybody feels different afterwards? So a great thing about a one take is everyone knows what they're making, as opposed to like shooting something out of sequence where you might have people coming in and out. Like on a commercial shoot, sometimes people don't even know what the end result's supposed to be.
Yeah.
They pop in, they're doing the last scene first. On a one take, you know all of that. So that's why I love being on a one take set, is everybody's going to go through something and come out a little changed in a lot of cases because they're hectic and crazy. So I think of this movie kind of similar to that. Like my recommendation is watch this movie, sit in a different space, think about your relation to your own codes in your life. Because every time that someone does something per code in this movie that's wrong, the quote unquote wrong decision in the moment, it's because they're following some rules. So if it could both be like, you could take away like, oh, I need some more codes in my life, or I've lost my codes. Or you might be like, I'm following some codes and rules that are dumb and are going to get me whatever negative thing might happen to you, you know? So that's it for me, is to hang in a space that's going to make you feel different and maybe make you think about moral codes that you're seeing in your own life through a different lens.
I like that. Well, dude, thanks. This has been great.
Oh, this is so fun.
This was so A, to do it and one in person, and B, thanks for the invite, and 3, this was just a great movie to talk about. This was awesome.
I love it. I'd do this every day if I could. I love it.
Great.
Appreciate you.
So, in the spirit of full transparency, after my recording session with Saleem, I got home, played back the audio I was recording, and found out that the file itself was corrupted. I can't express how mad I was, mostly at myself. That's just the way I process anger. It was my first time recording an in-person episode of this podcast, and I messed it up. But then I remembered what Saleem had mentioned. Why do we often remember things for only the way they end? Even when everything else leading up to it was great. I shouldn't let technical difficulties or just difficulties of any kind ruin the conversation we had and the genuine connection we made over our love of film. Endings give meaning, but not merely in their endings. They just bring a whole story to a close. Also, shout out to my iPhone 11 for making a pretty awesome backup recorder. So, a huge thanks to Saleem for having me over, and of course, thanks to you for listening. Currently, season 2 of Far Flung from TED is now available wherever you get your podcasts, and Saleem's new show on the science and philosophy behind emotions and how we deal with them is called More Than a Feeling from 10% Happier. There's an episode on nostalgia that is honestly a perfect pairing for what we've got going on here at the Film Nuts Podcast. So please go check that out. More info is available in the show notes. This season's theme is brought to us by theDeeepEnd. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our episodes and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to let us know how we're doing. Thanks again so much for listening. And until next time, remember to be present, live in the moment, and that chocolate is the best flavor of ice cream.